This video is going to be a real exercise in improvisation for me, as it's completely unscripted, and this system didn't exist before midnight last night. Let me just tell you a little bit about last 24 hours. My hunting season is open here in Pennsylvania. I was lucky enough to fill my first tag last evening, but you can imagine my truck is in a state of disarray. Everything's just tossed in there. My bag isn't put together. Here's the DSRT system I used in the soaking wet conditions. It's still wet. I've got to get that dried out. This video will be delving into a menagerie of the tools that I have given you for your toolbox. You've heard me use that analogy many times, that I'm giving you tools for your toolbox. And as we devise new tools, sometimes new ones supersede the old ones. I could give you countless examples. I won't hit them all. The point is, if it's ever overwhelming to you about what is the latest and greatest information based on any one video that you're watching, it could be a brand new video or it could be one for 2 or 3 years ago, head to my website, jrbtreeclimbing.com. What started out as a simple web page with just a couple of pages has now evolved into having detailed pages for everything that I do. We've got the page for my favorite knots. Well, that had to be split up into a special page for friction hitches. And friction hitches, like the Longhorn Agile and the JRB Ascender, they have their own page, and we discuss what they are best for. If I ever find that something is just not usable or not safe, those videos will disappear from the content. But if I've given you these tools and they're still on the channel, they're available for your use. And I've got some really creative folks on my Facebook group who are coming up with the best way that they like to put their system together. And as long as they're obeying the golden rules of always being tied in via their bridge, not a lineman's belt, their bridge to the tree, and managing slack, I'm happy. I espouse the use of redundancy. You see my recent video on the foot loop options and why I like the Garda in its new transformation mode, because I can always get redundancy. But if I'm going to choose, if I'm voting on your safety and you're just doing a crazy one stick like most people do, where they've got multiple feet of slack in their system versus one where you've got no slack or a foot of slack and you just don't have redundancy, well, I'm going to choose the latter. So as always, check the video description of this video for a litany of related videos, and I'll be mentioning some of them if I can remember the titles as we go. Sometimes we have to improvise. What if I showed up at a tree and I didn't have my Garda hitch foot loop? Or what if you are a new climber and you haven't built one of these, but you do have a rappel rope and you'd like to convert that into a climbing system? I've got a dedicated video on how I recommend you accomplish that. But I put together this little system, and we're going to show you as many possibilities as I can in terms of what's possible. Let me take it apart and show the pieces. Okay, let's start with the ends of this system. We always start with an anchor on the tree. And here I have built on each end a JRB cinch. Now, in my own usage, I don't use the JRB cinch because I prefer the Maverick hitch. Just a little bit more bulk and a little bit of less flexibility, because that you could get some clinking of the metal. So let's say you didn't have the capability to create a JRB cinch on both sides, or maybe you were testing a new system and you wanted to compare one versus the other. Well, it's a really simple matter to let that JRB cinch go away. And I don't have an end loop here. So if I'm retrieving this rope, I'll need to attach something to it. No big deal. But here we can compare our ability to affix different anchors on the tree. So let's start with the JRB cinch. Right? We don't need to climb to do this kind of experimentation. See my video on the JRB Cinch 2024 and practice figuring out, well, how high can I reasonably set that? I could set it to right here. And how would I advance that with a pole? So here's my Maverick pole. If you don't have a Maverick pole, you can improvise, you can build your own. Let's go to the other end of the system. Remember the saddle hunter's hitch? I don't use it very much in climbing anymore, but if I have to improvise and I have to get an anchor on the tree as high as I can get, because I don't have a pole, I can get a good foot higher with the saddle hunter's hitch. Now that doesn't look like much, but it's a foot more per move. And so, you know, if we needed to have 5 moves to get up the tree, it would save me an entire move by the time I get to hunting height. But when at all possible, use a pole. You want to see the differences between different anchors and what they're good for? We'll go to the website, look at the page on anchors. And of course, the Maverick hitch. This is my preferred option. And it goes up the tree the same way. Give yourself plenty of room to operate this, to walk it. If the tree's got a lot of rough bark, you might find yourself having to go more than 180 degrees. See how I got that behind the tree? Of course, it's going to be easier. It's going to be easier on a tree that doesn't have rough bark and of moderate diameter like this one. So those are some great options for anchors. Let's talk about what goes on the rope. So on this side of the system, I've got a Longhorn Agile hitch. This is the Longhorn Agile hitch. That'll be my primary point of attachment. And on this side of the system, I have brought back, this is the JRB Ascender foot loop. We got a dedicated video on that. Now, yeah, I don't use this that much anymore because I use the Garda hitch. But let's just take a look at the other side of the system. The other side of the system, I fashioned an end loop out of a Longhorn Agile hitch. And above it, it's got the same Longhorn Agile. My point is, these are 2 different foot loop options. In yellow, the JRB Ascender foot loop. In green, the Longhorn Agile foot loop. Okay, let's get that JRB cinch a little further up in the tree. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room. I put these up for demonstration purposes. Let's get them down so we've got some room to work. So this climb, I'm going to keep it really short because we're just trying to demonstrate as many tools in the toolbox as possible. Not necessarily climb so high that you can't see me. So you'll recall that I have a few different bridge designs. I'm wearing today, because my good saddle is in the truck and it's soaking wet, by the way. Here's my old Arrow Hunter Flex saddle. You saw me do a lot of videos in this. This has got the double adjustable bridge design, the very same one. I never untied it that I used in its video. And this has got the 523 JRB Ascender for a double adjustable bridge. Fantastic. I can use this in my climb. There's nothing wrong with this design. There's nothing wrong with it. So note this distance here. See this distance? When we're hitch climbing, we want this to be as compact as possible. And so I'll often fold my friction hitch under the load portion of the carabiner, and I find that gets me even closer. You just got to be you got to be rehearsed at getting that out if you need to. Now, I'm climbing without redundancy today. What does that mean? It means that although I have 2 points of attachment to the rope, one for my foot and one for my bridge, I don't have redundant bridges contacting the rope. Well, what does that mean? It means that if this friction hitch were to start to slip, I need to have a mitigation plan. And here's my mitigation plan. It's a Prusik loop. This Prusik loop I could use to form the one-handed headed knot if I needed to get out of an emergency. This Prusik loop could also be used to fashion a redundant bridge if you didn't have one. I've showed you how to do that. if you don't have all the tools that you see in my toolbox, there's still ways to improvise and get started or get yourself out of a jam if you forgot or lost something. Okay, so let's climb a few feet. When building systems, the length of rope is extremely important consideration. If you're building a system where you'd use the Maverick hitch as your anchor, 40 feet of rope is adequate. That's my recommendation. If you're building a system with the JRB cinch as your anchor on both sides, my preference is 50 feet of rope, and we've reviewed that in a recent video. It's simply the consideration of all retrieval scenarios whereby the cinch can get hung up in the tree, but the Maverick hitch, because it explodes, will always pop off and we can always retrieve it. I always leave, you can't see this in the back of the tree, I leave a tiny bit of space between my top of my friction hitch and my connection to the tree. So I always want to be able to reach in there and break it. And if the hitch is smacked up against my anchor, no matter what kind it is, I won't be able to do so. Okay, so I've gotten this far. Let's just do one more move. But this is a hybrid system, right? This time we're going to use a Maverick. With the Maverick, the only chance of noise is that end of the rope slapping onto my pole. I don't have any metal to worry about. I push up with the pole, pulling down with the cord. Great. Here's my other Longhorn Agile hitch. I'll get that on the right side. And by the way, if you're well versed with these friction hitches, executing a transfer, it really can be fairly straightforward. We can, if we're comfortable doing so, we can simply slowly release the one Longhorn Agile to place load here. Now, I'll get as much slack as I can out of it first. Right? See my video, executing a transfer. Okay. So I'm going to go just a little further, but in another real world scenario. Guess what I forgot today? I forgot my retrieval cord. It's in my truck. What if I realized that right about now? Well, we can always get down. That's the safest thing to do. Don't worry about it. And we can come back later and reclimb. But this is another example of where if you've got enough rope for the height that you're climbing, in an emergency, we can use the other end of our rope as our retrieval line. We could use that emergency piece of paracord that's in our emergency gear bag. And I do have one. Another detail, this tree's very wet, by the way, and slippery. In this climb, I can feel the performance difference between the JRB Ascender foot loop and the Longhorn Agile foot loop. And guess what? Advantage goes to the JRB Ascender. We're able to get that thing really compact and use the carabiner as a tending device. And so that is my recommendation. And here I am. Again, it's a little low for me. It's perfectly reasonable. I tend to go one more move, but I just want to give you an idea. Again, strong side shot, no problem. Weak side shot, I like to step under, and so I prefer a relatively high tie-in. So again, a lot of things you could realize at this stage in the game. Oh, shoot, let's say I didn't have this redundant bridge, right? I could fashion one. I could fashion one with my Prusic cord. Let's do that. First, I'll let this bridge out a bit. I'm fashioning a redundant bridge on the fly. All I need is a Prusic loop and a carabiner. And I intentionally used my good carabiner there. What if all I had for a spare carabiner was an old screw gate carabiner? Well, you know, these are not state-of-the-art, but if that's all you had, and you can be careful about managing this one-time situation where you are going to close the gate, I'm going to mount a rappel on a screw gate. Oh, I don't have a JRB end loop on this, and I forgot my retrieval line. What are the options? Again, I could use the other end of the rope. I always have some emergency supplies with me, so let's go that route. I have a little piece of paracord. I always carry a little piece of paracord. I've got a knife. This paracord has not been unraveled. I don't want to think about how long. I don't even remember how I coiled it. I coiled it from the middle. So this is going to become my retrieval cord. I'm going to unlock my Maverick. I simply have an overhand knot on the end. Here's a simple bend. I'll just create a bull hitch. Put it over that stopper knot. And I've got a retrieval line. Let's lengthen our bridge and rappel. See my video executing rappel on the Munter friction hitch. Especially when trees are wet. Be very careful if you got anything metal in the tree. I saw a post just yesterday from the two tether team saying that the tree was too wet. It was too wet to execute a two tether climb. And I respect that opinion, and that climber pivoted over and used SRT that day. Consider the conditions and do what's appropriate. A little bit more of a choppy rappel because look what I'm doing. I'm tending a friction hitch out of the way as I go down the tree. remove myself. I always leave my carabiners inside these compact Longhorn Agile hitches, and if not, I'll put in a slipped overhand bend. See my recent video on that. So I got a mess at the bottom of the tree here, and I'll clean that up. But because I've got the paracord here, I mean, retrieving a Maverick with paracord is effortless, no problem. Okay, again, totally unscripted. A lot of tools in our toolbox. You don't need to watch me clean this up. The point is that you can grab those tools out of your toolbox and you can improvise. I prefer that you do this kind of creative experimentation in the off season, but you know, I've been in this situation. It was in this woods, and it was a couple years ago where I showed up and I had my DSRT system and no foot loop, and it wasn't game over. I just climbed moving rope system that day. I just hip thrusted my way up the tree. I didn't do anything to the system. I clipped into it the same way, and I improvised. The point is that you think about the tools that are in your toolbox, you evaluate your own system, you decide what tools you want to use in a normal situation and which ones you want to have there as a backup. A nice thing about a climb like this, look what I could do. I could compare the performance of a JRB Ascender foot loop to a Longhorn Agile foot loop, and the advantage goes to the JRB Ascender. And the example I just gave, and compare, you see me compare friction hitches in a DSRT system. I realize I've given you a lot of terms, a lot of language. If you're new to the channel, these terms might be overwhelming, and I realize it's a daunting affair to take all of this on, but I am doing everything I can to make it easy as possible for you, including a dictionary of terms on the website, including a page for new saddle hunters. And I promise next season to devote more time to going back to basics and giving you some information that's germane to the new saddle hunter. You've heard me say it before, but if I'm helping you, please help somebody else. You got the slack out of your system and you're climbing safely, then go grab a friend. You don't need to use my videos necessarily. You know, do whatever makes sense to knock some sense into their heads. Hunting season is on now, and although I look forward to it, there's a part of it I don't look forward to, and the part I don't look forward to is seeing posts about injuries that could have been prevented. And I've got some friends myself who are still doing, they're knuckleheads, right? They're still doing what they've always done, and they're not willing to even listen about tying in the whole time, or they're not willing to think about what could happen if they fell onto their fall arrest harness and they didn't have cell phone reception. I want you guys to think about all those things, and then I want you to get your friends to think about them too. We'll never know about the accidents we prevent, but we'll be haunted by the ones that occur. Thanks as always, guys.